Hi, I'm Brendon, the Technology Concierge. Today, I'm joined by Roger Gregg from Lightyear. They're a company that provide intelligent purchasing and automated accounts payable. Good morning, Roger.
Morning, how are you doing?
Really good, thank you. Roger, I'm really excited to be talking to you today because it's been guest-facing technology, but I
Yep.
know there's a lot happening behind the scenes, in the back office, in finance departments to streamline hotel operations and reduce costs. So I'm quite excited to hear about that today and obviously to educate. I know I'm going to learn a lot, but I hope our listeners do as well.
No pressure on me then. Let's go.
That's it, no pressure. I suppose to kick it off then, what are a couple of the trends that we're seeing in finance departments that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so it's a good question. From a purely finance perspective, I think the two main ones that I've seen are accounts payable, and maybe less about the procurement side, but let's take accounts payable as being procurement, accounts payable, and payments. So that is definitely a huge focus, and it's become more of a focus over the last, it probably even started before the pandemic, maybe the last 3 years. There's a definite shift in, hold on, do we really need to be doing things this way? So procure to pay, accounts payable, whatever you want to call it, I think that's one. And the other one that I'm seeing a lot of is the interoperability of systems, or the lack of it, from a point of view of now, people when they take a reservation are saying, well, listen, if you don't turn up or you cancel within X number of days or whatever it is, there's a fee involved. And then so you've got a booking system that looks after that, and then it's probably connected to a payment system like a Stripe or something, and then you've got functions package that might be connected to the same Stripe account, but it doesn't necessarily talk to the booking system. And then you've got a CRM which connects the two, because you want to know if someone is, not in the habit of turning up, that, your CRM system that looked after functions, should really be, across that as well. And those all talk to pause and things like that. So I'm not quite sure there's an elegant solution in market at the minute. Certainly at our hospitality business, it's not accommodation hotels. We have a distinct, group of softwares, and they're getting better at talking to each other. But I'm hearing more and more people asking me, going, what do you guys do? And unfortunately, I don't have a solution right there at the moment, but I'm seeing it more and more as a challenge for finance, so that they are elegantly reconciling things from one source of truth.
Okay. That whole interface issue, we have grappled with in hospitality for years. It's slowly starting to get a little bit better, I think, with the introduction of published APIs. Costs have come down a little bit. And we're seeing as well on the hospitality side, mainly with the property management system, which has been the central core, the hub of everything, and all interfaces have hung off it. We're starting to see middleware companies come in who will take over that interfacing piece. So I think there's hope in that respect. But from the finance point of view, I hadn't really thought about it until I was talking to Matthew, who works with you, that obviously the pandemic has had a big impact as well from where people work and things like that. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it was a shock to everyone's system, so we don't have to talk about that. But we've as a Lightyear, and our previous product, which was called InvitBox, we were launched way back in 2011. We've always had a really strong hospitality focus, because we came from hospitality and we still operate hospitality venues, so we get hospital. And there have been traditionally, there's always been the paper shuffling that sort of comes with a hospitality venue, distinct points where deliveries are coming in, the loading dock, the cellar, deliveries being couriered in, then you've got SaaS transactions being emailed in and things like that. And it's always been a thought, let's all gather that up into one place for processing. And people generally hit the print button to do that, because a lot of paper invoices were coming in from different locations. And that caused a problem, though, when you were then trying to, for a general manager or an executive chef or whatever it is, getting those documents that previously maybe have been approved by a frontline chef, an operations manager, a marketing manager, and then running their eye over them for the second time.
Yep.
Clearly a problem if you couldn't get to the venue, or you were being discouraged, to touch the same pieces of paper as everyone else. So it was certainly a shock to the system. The concept that Lightyear has had from day one, we always had this as our little mantra, but we broadcast it more during the pandemic, was if you start with paper, you end up with rubbish. You end up with rubbish processes, rubbish systems, rubbish data, and just rubbish. So the whole premise behind Lightyear is people will still send pieces of paper to the venue, and that's absolutely fine. And that's the sanity check. Nothing changes, but in parallel, they're just emailing their PDF, automating it from their system so that when the printed copy goes with the driver, that an email is also sent to your Lightyear account, and that's where we do the data extraction. So the paper now just becomes a sanity check for doing temperature checks or things like that, ticking off actually what you got. Yep. But rather than then being beholden to that piece of paper, I can do everything, basically on the computer. During the start of the pandemic, we pivoted quite a bit. We had a roadmap that was focused on procurement, and then after that, we were going to move on to mobile approvals. And we quickly flipped that around and we built the mobile approvals app first. So people could literally it's a bit like Tinder for bills, swipe right to approve, swipe left to decline a bill, add notes, assign it to a friend or things like that. So it changed our roadmap as a company as well. Yeah. But it also forced behavioral change in organizations where people were now saying, I can't get into approve, you got to scan that. And the guys are going, well, do I have to scan it? Because I've got a digital copy here. I could just email to you. And then people were like, hold on, there must be a better way to collate all of these different scans and digital copies. And frankly, people started looking more than they had previously. Yep. And our name was popping up, which was good for us.
That's fantastic. I saw a classic example the other day from a large hotel, from a very well-known brand. It was scanned. It was a scanned purchase order that was sent to us actually for just on $200 that was actually signed by 3 different people. So I can just imagine, how many days it would have taken to actually pass that piece of paper around and, to get the general manager to do that final approval for $200. It just doesn't make sense, does it?
The cost of procuring, raising a purchase order or processing a bill is crazy. We still don't believe it, but it's validated data. It's guaranteed to be $30 wow. on the way out for the purchase order and on the way back in. Some businesses are more. And funny, when we first launched the product 10 years ago, the original InvitBox, we originally said, right, let's not try and change people's processes. If people are used to raising something, putting it on someone's desk, that being signed and then move to another desk, let's allow people to replicate that process, but just do it digitally. It is strange how people will enforce a $200 bill to, negotiate heavily on the product that's being purchased for $200, but they're paying an extra $30 on the way out and an extra $30 on the way in. It's quite funny. Well, it's not funny, serious, but you know what I mean.
It's serious, and as you said, it's still paper-based. So that there's the cost involved. It could be that it gets paid, it gets into the system twice. It's just fraught with danger, I think. And
it's also as well, there's a very famous case, I won't mention the name, of a hospitality group where bills were being entered into the system from a point of view of a piece of paper, and you were no idea about the source of truth. Where did this document come from? The bill was just being slipped into a pile, which was then being manually entered. So you actually don't have any source of truth to the source of the document. So fraud it's crazy in this regard.
That is very true. That's very true. And obviously, we're seeing a lot of the work from home. Obviously, if you're a frontline employee, you can't do that. But, I know general managers that will, from time to time, take the opportunity to work from home if they can. They may not even be feeling 100%, and they're like, well, I'm not going to go into the office or go into the property. So with Lightyear, that whole process for them to approve something, as you said, is completely digital now. It can go from the originator through to the financial controller, through to the general manager, and then be issued to the company that you want to purchase from, right? Really simply.
Exactly. And with Lightyear, we're not saying that a business such as a hotel would use Lightyear for all procurement, right? Because a lot of things that you order from, your consumables, beverages, things like that, a lot of those actually go through the portal of the supplier. So we're not saying change habits, but there's a lot of, let's call it ad hoc control that needs to be put in place. I need a repair done for this fridge. Let's raise a purchase order for the guy to come in and do that. Yeah. Entertainment, security, things like that. Stuff that doesn't necessarily have to go through, someone else's portal. But yeah, you can. It's almost like the gamification of purchasing an AP, where if you have your notifications turned on your phone and someone raises a purchase order and they want you to approve it, it goes bing bong and you just swipe right to approve and it's done. And that's the same with bills and credit notes and things on the way in. But yeah, it speeds up the process because you don't have to get to your desk or get to an email and print something out and scan it and send it back. It's the sort of little digital thumbprint that comes with it. So it certainly, it gives you a more robust approvals workflow, and it gives you more flexibility, because if a certain person is not available, you can easily go, well, okay, well, I can send it to their boss straight away because I know they're not available and I really need to get this process sped up. It's quite costly, that process, and certainly the flexibility to make it faster and therefore cheaper is appealing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Sustainability is a really big issue at the moment. I saw a comment actually in a report that says we're, in today's world, we're moving from financial budgets to carbon budgets. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned obviously printing. That's a really big one. What other sort of sustainability and benefits are involved in introducing a digital solution? We
just worked with a group rolling out Lightyear a number of months ago. And anyway, at the end of the financial year there, they were going for green certification. So last month in July, they basically looked at the changes of the previous July to this July. And we were saying things like obviously paper, printing, toner cartridges and things like that. What came out of their audit was they had actually shrunk their accounts payable team from 4 people in an office to 1 person working flexi in and out hot desking, right? Wow. They put those other 3 people into other roles in the organization, but the accounts payable function, for want of a better word, across their 13, 14 hotels actually became 1 person who was only there a couple of days of the week. So their audit actually revealed that their biggest saving was actually in the cost of running the office, the electricity of the office and all of that sort of stuff, because you've only got 1 computer running, not 4. You don't have paper running, you don't have the room being heated and things like that. So from a sustainability perspective, it's not the normal way I would think of it, because I'm thinking about paper, toner, ink, things like that. But their audit basically showed their biggest savings was actually the shrinking of the footprint of the human office.
That is interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting, actually, isn't it? And as you said, those staff that were in accounts payable can be redeployed. It's an issue we've got at the moment, trying to find good staff. So if you can actually, free some staff up and use them in another area, then that's a wonderful thing as well.
I'll give you a great story, actually. So this was actually before pandemic. We went into a national fast food group, and we were introducing Lightyear to the group. And you can always, when you're introducing something that's a change process, there's always someone that's a bit prickly to it, right? And that person is generally the person who feels as though this is going to impact their job. It's going to make their job less safe and secure. Yep. So we basically said, and we identified the person pretty quickly, and we said, can anyone in the room tell us the price of chicken thigh fillets off the boat? And everyone looked and went, no. And this one guy put his hand up, and whatever the price was, $6.90. And I said, you know more about procurement than anyone else in your organization, and I guarantee your job is just manual entry. And he went, that's all I do. And I went, right. Imagine how much you could do for an organization, knowing what you buy and what you're spending for it. If you could then go and negotiate, and your work in AP becomes 6 hours a week as opposed to 36 hours a week. Yeah. So it's very, very true. This generally doesn't mean that you are then going to reduce your head count, although that is certainly an opportunity if people want to do that. It's reallocating those resources to actually make a difference in the organization, as opposed to just manually entering and pushing paper around.
Yeah, using people for higher capabilities, really.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. So, Roger, you've obviously seen a lot. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen, and how can people avoid them? Obviously, automating is a first thing, but there are other things that they can do to alleviate
it. Yes, I suppose in accounts payable and procurement, a lot of people who feel as though they've got a really robust system in place, and it generally is a robust system, they just don't appreciate the cost of the system, right? Because they imagine that person has always got to be there doing that job, and there's $85,000 a year, et cetera, et cetera. When they go digital, they say, right, I want to replicate my process that I have at the moment. And we're very happy to go, listen, do you want us to challenge your thinking, or do you want this to be a little subservient session? And everyone sort of goes, oh, please challenge my thinking. No one says, yes, please be subservient, right?
Okay.
But a lot of what people have put in place was necessary because of paper. Okay. What needs to be, or what can be put in place when you go digital can mean steps that you thought were absolutely essential can actually be eliminated. You know, by only saying that this person can only buy this type of product, you know, you can sort of then give it, well, if all you can do in Lightyear is order this sort of product, and then it goes to a person based on just a dollar value, right? There's a number of steps then that can actually be eliminated from the old paper process. So I think when people are looking to implement Lightyear or any digital solution, sometimes it is, I just want to replicate all the safety mechanisms that I have in place at the moment, which were only put there because it was a paper process that was really open to fraud or whatever it is.
That makes sense. Okay. So it's a change in, as you said, in thinking and being willing to accept that with automation, there will be some changes to the system, and they will improve the operation, as we've discussed, you know.
Yeah, I listen, hand on heart, I've been doing this for 11 years now, as much as I hate to admit that. But I've never seen a business implement software and then take it out, okay?
Right.
You know, implementation, it's like, if I get the implementation right, that's a great thing. The decision to go digitally it's not a difficult decision to make. If it's planned properly, it can be a really smooth process. Some people do overthink it though. You know, we can literally, if someone picks up the phone to the team this morning, we can have them, you know, teach them how to set it up, and they can be running themselves tomorrow morning. It's, you know, it's straightforward. But you do have organizations phoning in saying, listen, I'm thinking about putting Lightyear in January, and I just want to start the process now. And we're like, you know, call us in December. With the greatest of respect, you don't have to worry about this right now. So again, maybe sometimes people wanting to replicate the existing process, and then some people overthinking it. Like we're not reinventing the wheel now. We maybe were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've got whatever it is, let's say 5,000 hospitality clients in Australia using Lightyear. They all pretty much have an overlap of their processes. And I guarantee that most of them are doing things 90% the same way. So you, as an organization coming to us, we generally go, listen, would you like to speak to another group like you that has put Lightyear in? Do you want to learn from them, or do you want to just take, you know, our advice as to how you might do it? We don't really mind, because our advice is got a big overlap to what most people do. Sometimes it's just a matter of just sort of going with the flow and just accepting that this is the way to do it. But if people want to challenge us, we're happy to be challenged.
That is interesting. So one of my next questions was going to be, you know, obviously how difficult it is it to implement a solution like Lightyear? And you've answered that. It is probably a day's worth of work.
Well, yeah. So it's first time coming to Lightyear, conceptually getting your head around it, logging on, creating the account, you know, stepping through the first process.
Yeah.
Let's say a day.
Yep.
But if you have it running in one venue and you wanted going in venue number 2, it's literally a 5-minute process. I mean, so we're not even involved. We do have a program that we can hold people's hand through the first implementation of Lightyear, but we're not in the business of making money off a software implementation charge. You know, as a hospitality owner, it pains me when people go, it's $179 a month, but it's $3,000 setup.
Yeah.
Like, come on. I don't care. I know how easy it is to set these things up behind the scenes. So we've got no interest at all about trying to make money on the implementation. We know that if we get you using the product and it's whatever, $179 a month or $329, just depends on the number of documents you process.
Yeah.
We know we've got very low attrition. So we're not going to lose that customer, and we're going to get $179 for life.
Yeah.
That's our goal. So we've got to make the product easy enough for people to set it up themselves, so that we don't have to get involved and charge them. It should be a process you just get going on your own, but we're here if, you know, help is needed.
Yep. Yep. And I suppose being software as a service, being cloud-based, that is the way, as you said, it should be. The system should be intuitive enough that they don't require thousands of dollars and days of implementation and someone to come on site, which was the way it would be with on-premise based systems.
And listen, don't get me wrong, there are a number of systems, like our POS systems that we run through our venues. Yeah. That is a local server, and the local server does talk to a cloud-based server, but there has to be an implementation, from the company that provides us with that. Just for backup purposes, you've got to run it as a local area network if the cloud communication goes down. So I get there are some systems that require a server, but I remember the days of working years ago down in Cargo Bar in Sydney, and there was the little server underneath the desk, and nobody kicked the server, otherwise everything goes down. It's thankfully those days are well past us.
Yeah, I've seen in a previous life I was property management system installer, and there's some scary things, cables being held together with duct tape.
Little rat teeth marks in them and things like that. It's yeah, indeed.
That's true. So on that note, I mean, if somebody is looking to automate the accounts receivable and purchasing process, what's your advice? What should they look for in a system?
It'll be different for different people. It's mostly like buying a point of sale system. Some businesses need this, businesses need this, right? So for instance, in our organization, we don't do, and this is our hospitality organization, we don't do any procurement of beverage through Lightyear, right? It's just because we work with a number of bespoke suppliers on the procurement, right? Of product, of meat, things like that. So we don't do that, but we do a purchase order for everything else. Whereas other organizations who don't have that sort of artisan buying that we sort of do, they would be able to, for instance, they're basically ordering 75 kilos of this sort of meat and all of this sort of stuff. You can't put everything through a Lightyear and actually, bring up all your products that you order from the supplier and just order it that way. Okay. So it's different for different people. Some people use, the platforms that go and negotiate, 2-ply, 4.5-inch napkins in white on your behalf, and you just order 2-ply, 4.5-inch napkins, and they run off and basically then work out who's going to supply to you. So difficult for me to say what you should be looking for. It's different for every organization.
Okay. But obviously, one of the things we picked up on in the start of the conversation is obviously, a solution that's cloud-based, that automated, that has that sort of almost, as you said, you've replicated the in-tray, out-tray approval process, something that streamlines that.
I would agree with that. So yes, sorry to maybe come back to that first question. You're right. I wouldn't be looking at anything that's not cloud-based. I would definitely have a customizable approvals workflow built in. Yep. There are a number of procurement or accounts payable solutions that don't have an approvals workflow. So on the AP side, some things go into zero, then your approvals workflow basically, or your approval software brings it out of zero, allowing you to approve it, and then basically drops it back into zero. But that makes no sense to me. I want data in my accounting software only to be there once it's actually been approved, right? Similarly on the procurement side, right? So I think flexibility on where you can order from. You want to be able to order from your phone, or you want to be able to order from any computer. So that's your cloud-based, and then with some sort of approvals workflow built in as well would be the baseline for me. If it doesn't have that, I wouldn't be touching it. But I think most of them do have that now. I mean, the world has certainly moved on the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, look, the world has changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, without a doubt. I think, and we were talking about this at the start as well, sometimes people are so busy, they're not sure what they should be looking at. And, you do see mistakes. You see people sort of buying systems and it's like, oh my gosh, why have you bought sort of an on-premise system that is based on this when everything now is cloud-based and it's just so much more flexible, and you've probably even paid too much for it.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. I mean, people think that implementing something like a Lightyear is a huge, upheaval. We got to dedicate a month to this thing, and off we go. I remember when we were conceptualizing how to do this accounts payable thing back in 2011. Like, we were in a hospitality group. We were processing about 34,000 bills a year. Some of those bills were getting manually entered into point of sale. Then all bills were getting manually entered into MYOB desktop back in the day.
Yeah.
And, that was line by line coding, right? And it was expensive. So back then, when we went to the custom, we were losing pieces of paper all over the place, right? They were going into the guy's back pocket. He was going home on the bus, not wanting to admit he had the bill. He threw it out. We never got the bill. And the one thing we noticed when we were contacting all of the suppliers to say, hey, I think we're missing some invoices, they were like, where do you want us to email the PDF?
Yeah.
I was like, hold on, right? Everyone can email a PDF. And so the only thing that you need to do with Lightyear is basically get the PDFs into Lightyear, and Lightyear does all of the rest, all of the automatic coding, routing it to the people whose job it is to approve it, and then getting the data into your point of sale system and into your accounting software. So it's actually not a huge implementation, but I think people do think that this is going to be something that I need to dedicate a lot of time to, but it's a very simple process. We're just basically extracting the data from the metadata within a supplier's PDF. The supplier does nothing different. They just email it in, and we know they can do that. And I sort of across the Lightyear network in the hospitality and aged care space in Australia, it's over 97% of documents are coming into Lightyear accounts as a system generated PDF. We're way down to, only a couple of percent of scans. Whereas if I go back to 2013, it was 75% coming in as system generated PDFs and 25% scans. So the world has moved on. Everyone's emailing the PDF automatically with the piece of paper, and you just throw your piece of paper away, so to speak.
Yeah, as you were saying before, the piece of paper is primarily a packing list. If you're having some fresh produce delivered, you're basically verifying, against that invoice or packing list stroke invoice.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, and seller guys want that, right? It's my sanity check. But once it goes onto the clipboard, it's like that's just to remind me that delivery did come in, so that when I'm looking at the invoice in Lightyear, I can just go, yeah, got that, and just click the green button in Lightyear and just shred the piece of paper.
And as a supplier to the hospitality industry as well, that's a godsend, because we, a couple of years ago, many years ago, but we had to implement a process that when an invoice was due, we would actually call the finance department to make sure it was in the system, because we supplied a product to the engineer or the housekeeper. And, then we're obviously expecting to be paid on a certain date. We found that when we were following up, it's like, well, we don't have that. And then we'd have to go back to the person we supplied it to, and it's like, I haven't approved that yet. And so what we're saying is that if it's automatically, sent into the system, then it alleviates, from a supplier's point of view as well, the issue that paperwork can get lost, and you can be better than normal.
Yeah, so we this is data from our hospitality group. I haven't looked at all of Lightyear, but the average time from a bill hitting Lightyear to getting into the accounting software is 3.1 days, and that includes weekends, right? And the other part of Lightyear is Lightyear takes the statements from your suppliers and automatically reconciles the statements from the suppliers and identifies any documents you may not have in Lightyear, and then you can one-click ask for copies to be sent in. So what that does as well is, from a supplier's perspective, there is no chance, so long as it's been emailed in, of the bill actually not getting in front of the person whose job it is to approve it. From a customer sense, it means the fast approval of bills.
Yep.
And that has allowed us, we've got a number of suppliers, 21, 28, 35 days, but who offer us early settlement discount on 7 and 10 day payment. Okay. And we can avail of that 7 and 10 day early settlement discount from those suppliers. So again, it's sort of offering a bit of a discount. The funds are there. I may as well take the discount on the purchase, as opposed to just sitting on the money for another 21 days, earning nothing. I may as well take it somewhere, right?
Very good point. Very good point. Roger, it's been an amazing chat. As we get ready to wrap up, are there any final thoughts around the whole process of automation and accounts payable and finance?
I think what has been useful, so in the really early days of Lightyear, when we were reaching out to people and saying, hey, have you thought about, something like Lightyear? People were like, no, I don't have time for that. I don't think I need it. And what we were saying back then was, well, can you do us a favor? Next time you get your profit and loss, right? Do you want to have a look at what accounts payable is costing you, right? So you never see accounts payable as a line item on your P&L.
No.
The cost is there. It's built between salaries. It's the cost of the desk. It's the perhaps duplicate payments that you don't know about. It's XYZ. It builds up. So when someone actually sits back and does an audit and go, how much does Peter and Jason and Julie and that room and the lack of early settlement discounts and perhaps the overcharging that we're not catching, how does all of that cost stack up? It's a bit of an eye-opener.
Yep.
And there's one hospitality group that we have, and this is now 2 or 3 years ago, 10 venues. Anyway, they were paying around about 350,000 a year on salaries, just salaries, and then there was the desk and things like that.
Yep.
And they implemented Lightyear, and for around about $1,400 a month, they took that from 4.5 people down to 1. So it's sometimes the first thing you need to do is get an honest assessment of, okay, what does that business unit actually cost me?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you look at the expensive ones and go, oh, I'm going to fix that one now. So yeah, an internal lens is a good place to start in order to work out where you actually need to focus your sort of valuable time in order to save money.
Yep. That makes perfect sense. Sometimes we've got that philosophy, if it isn't broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. But
sometimes that works, but it can be an expensive process.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And the world has changed, and I think we need to take this opportunity to look at everything that we do, just make sure that we're doing it in the best and most efficient way, particularly with staffing and resources being an issue in hospitality. And as we've spoken about, use people in better areas. Your example of the chap who was doing, data entry, who can now actually add value by negotiating. It's a further saving to the business.
Yeah, agreed.
Roger, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
No, I've really enjoyed it too. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.